So last night we talked a lot about Roy Cohn, who was Trump's mentor in many ways. And he taught Trump pretty much most of what he knows about strong arming people in business and especially blackmail. He was a notorious blackmailer who, being a lawyer in New York, he did things that were impossible, like getting mob bosses off of massive charges. He himself was charged with blackmail on numerous occasions. And even with Trump, early in his career, he was able to use blackmail and other strong arm tactics to get Trump what he wanted, whether it was zoning issues where he only wanted to sell to white people in one circumstance and he was going to get in trouble for that. Roy Cohn got him out of that. There was a lot of different circumstances where Roy Cohn helped him out. And so notoriously, he was deeply involved with the mob. And this story here talks about how Roy Cohn basically brought Trump in to the New York Mafia, introduced him to a lot of different mobsters, including Fat Tony Salerno, Carmine Galante, and Paul Castellano. They are bosses in the Genovese, Bonanno, and Gambino crime families. He maintained those connections through the years. The whole Atlantic City thing is notorious. That city was deeply embedded in the mob, and nobody would really do business there until Trump came along. And so one of the things that was really, really interesting was the Plaza Hotel and Roy Cohn's involvement there. Yeah, I tried to show a clip from The Apprentice. This movie gave an interesting depiction of how he had like the whole Plaza Hotel wired, and he had all of this blackmail material and all these different people. He had like a collection of tapes. And of course, this was a dramatization for the movies. But at the same time, like this was all based on whether it was court information, which we'll get into later. I'll bring up some of the court documents against him, or just admissions that he made to the police even. There isn't a ton of media reporting about it, unfortunately, but there are court documents that I was able to find. But let's take a look at what the directors from The Apprentice said, because there was some very interesting things in here. Let's see. Yeah, so he says, Roy's use of blackmail, and especially tape recordings, phone calls, is well documented. Roy had a woman in the basement who actually ran a switchboard, and she would tape and listen to all the conversations. I found it so powerful that Roy would basically tape record his own clients for blackmail and for leverage. And this was something that he was known to do on a regular basis. This is how he got people off their charges. This is how he rose up in the world. A lot of the blackmail went down at the Plaza Hotel, and he had parties that were similar to Epstein's parties. So this here is some court documentation from back then. And this is showing, it's a very, very long document. It's over 100 pages, this type, but right here gives the summary. And it says, testimony regarding child trafficking investigation from New York State in 1982 regarding specifically the trafficking of underage boys, creation of abuse material, nationwide tracking networks, etc. Testimony includes allegations that international intelligence agencies use these networks to collect information on clients of underage abuse. So yeah, this was one of the cases that Roy Cohn was involved in. There are some really, really weird things with the Plaza Hotel. So Trump bought this 2 years after Roy Cohn died. So the hotel where Roy Cohn famously blackmailed a bunch of people, 2 years after he died, Trump bought it for over $400 million. And then there were some issues though later on, because it only like was under his control for a couple of years because he kind of ran it into the ground. But when things were going downhill, it says Citibank, the hotel's creditor, was close to reaching a deal for a Singaporean billionaire and Saudi prince to become new owners of the plaza. In an effort to undermine the deal, which was being discussed in the hotel's Vanderbilt suite, a Trump executive hid for 10 days in a secret room of the suite to eavesdrop. Trump still lost. So he hid in a secret room for 10 days to eavesdrop. The detail isn't given here, but I would think that there's probably some kind of recording devices involved with that, because it's not just like he's hiding in a room where he can hear things in the next room. There has to be some kind of elaborate operation which would have some kind of recording devices. So there's that. But another weird angle of this is there's a very real possibility that Trump hosted these same kind of parties for those couple years that he owned the hotel. So there is actually some documentation on that as well. This talks also about the Plaza Hotel. It says here that Trump was known for hosting parties at the Plaza Hotel, which he owned at the time, that attracted rich men and younger women. And now somebody says if they were checking IDs, it was to make sure the girls were young enough. Gross, who's known Trump for 40 years, said jokingly. So this is like a friend of Trump who said that they were checking IDs to make sure that they were young. And now this is very similar to the type of things we saw in the documents from Jeffrey a couple weeks ago. So there's that, but it actually gets a little bit crazier because there's an entirely different source here that says that drugs were given to the children at these parties, essentially. And I believe that this was even admitted from people who were actually friends with Trump too, and still Trump supporters. Donald Trump allegedly held cocaine-fueled parties in the 1990s where wealthy old men would hook up with young models, some as young as 15, according to the Daily Mail. The parties were hosted in the New York Plaza Hotel, which Trump owned from 1988 until 1992, when he could no longer manage the debt load and came to an agreement to give up a large share of the building to its creditors, according to sources who attended the parties and spoke to the U.S. news outlet. A photographer who attended some of the parties and wished to remain anonymous said that the models were enticed to attend by being promised that you'll meet rich guys who will help you. And the attraction for the men was young girls assuming they'd get somewhere. He claimed that the girls were as young as 15 and they were over their heads. They had no idea and they ended up in situations, the man told the Daily Beast, according to the report. There were always dramas because the men threw money and drugs at them to keep them enticed. It's based on power and dominating girls who can't push back and can be discarded. There's always someone to pick them back up. Nobody wants to call home and say, help me. So there was another part in here. Trump would allegedly wander through the parties enjoying himself. Trump was in and out. He would wander off with a couple girls. I saw him. He was getting, like crazy. Trump was at the heart of it. He loved the attention. And in private, he was a total beast, he says. Describing his lifestyle before his first marriage. So yeah, Andy Lucia, a male model who allegedly organized the parties. So this was the party organizers, and he's a current Trump supporter. And he says, there was cocaine around. I never saw him do that. Donald Trump does not do cocaine. He's in control of himself. So, like, we don't really care if Donald's doing cocaine, but he's like serving cocaine to underage girls, and it's basically admitted by the guy who hosted the party. When asked about the age of the girls, Lucchesi told the Daily Beast that there were a lot of girls, 14 look 24. That's as juicy as I can get. I never asked how old they were. I just partook. What? This guy, I didn't even get to that part when I was looking through this earlier. So this guy is total creep and just admitting to it and admitting to what was going down at this Plaza Hotel. So Trump, he held a memorial for Robert Maxwell at the Trump Plaza. This was the first time that Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell were pictured together. So that's just another very weird connection. After Maxwell's death, and we're going to get into Maxwell in a minute, Trump held this memorial service, and this was the first time that Ghislaine and Epstein were photographed together. It's kind of crazy. So yeah, I think that there's a lot going on with that place.